Our next speaker, as I said, could easily sing us a song here, but she's not going to. She's going to actually give us a very in-depth presentation. Eve Maler of Sun Microsystems is principal engineer. She is also, my colleague and friend Dave Kearns once described her as the Renaissance woman. She is definitely a geek. She is actually one of the inventors of XML. And where would we all be if there was no XML? We'd still be rooting around in HTML code. But actually, she's much more than that. She, when she shuts down her computer, she loves to sing rock and roll and admits to, quote, practicing keyboards without a license. Her current band, by the way, is called Mud Junket, formerly known as Mudcat, and she plays what she calls bluesy, funky, rootsy rock and roll. Maybe we can get her to give us a taste of her stuff this evening at the party. In the last year, she's been thinking a lot about permissioned data sharing and how to make everyday identity experience more responsive to what people want by rebalancing the power relationships in online interactions, making those interactions more convenient, giving people more reason to trust those whom they decide to share information with. She described it in a press briefing that we had yesterday as a sort of a turn-around CRM. You know, where it's not the company managing its relationships with the customer, but no, the customer actually managing his relationship with the vendor. So you coined the term VRM for what is happening over here. The topic of her subject of her talk today is the care and feeding of online relationships, and I am looking forward to this very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eve Maler.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Tim and everybody, for inviting me here. So today I'm going to be talking about online relationships, and I don't mean the online dating kind of online relationships. I actually mean relationships between humans and applications, although I hope you'll indulge me in a couple of analogies with the romantic relationships as we go. So I want to point out, you know, we've been focusing, at least in this latter keynote session this afternoon, on a lot of enterprise use cases for identity and access management. But I think it's worth pointing out that identity is really undergoing a big change. You know, we're used to an enterprise environment where, frankly, the people whose digital identities we're managing are captive, perhaps not unlike this tiger here. We've got homogeneous environments where we can impose rules on the people who are using our systems. And, you know, there's one payroll application, there's one application for doing job X, there's one application for doing job Y. And really what we focus on there is bottom line savings. And yet, on the open internet, where people are really free agents and can choose what they do and what they don't do online, you see a different kind of environment. First of all, notice that it's really somebody's core business if they're offering, say, a Web 2.0 application. So it's no longer about bottom line savings, it's about top line profit. And that changes the game quite a bit. That's one change. Another change is that the people whose identities you're managing, you can't actually control them. You have to persuade them to do things. They can choose what PC they use, they can choose what phone they use, they can install whatever they like on those devices. If you can't persuade them to do something, they won't do it. If you make the process of checking out of some e-commerce application too onerous or offensive, they'll just walk away from a nice full shopping cart. So you start to see emerging properties and free market properties and kind of messy properties, whereas in the enterprise we can keep things nice and clean. What's really interesting is that, you know, because of a lot of privacy and consent laws in many of the countries throughout the world, some of the people who are working inside an enterprise actually have some of the same rights around privacy, for example, that they do as free agents on the open internet. And so that's a good reminder that employees and citizens are people too. And they demand choice, especially as they get used to working on the open internet when they're at home or doing something on their own recognizance on their own behalf. You know, they demand choice and usability and kind of personal respect to the extent possible in an enterprise environment as well. Now, we've heard this phenomenon of the Enterprise 2.0, And it's really true that the everyday enterprise, especially with smaller companies, looks more and more like what I'm calling the open internet. We see trends around deperimeterization, where the boundaries around security domains are starting not to look like fortress walls anymore, but they're literally dissolving. And we're also seeing this phenomenon where the applications that we use in the back office, actually they're starting to look a lot more like the applications we use for fun and profit. In some cases, they're literally the same applications. You see in the corner there of this picture, Google and so on. I was reminded earlier today that Google has implemented SAML for single sign-on since 2006. So there's evidence right there that these worlds are blending. And one of the tools that we use in this everyday enterprise to manage this new kind of heterogeneous environment is indeed federated identity, which, my shorthand for federated identity is simply distributing identity data and identity tasks across domains. And what that nets out to in a sort of ideal situation, perhaps recalling the long-lived provisioning talk is, or maybe in opposition to it, is that you're able to transfer identity information, authentication, attribute, authorization information from authoritative sources to whoever needs to rely on it at runtime. And some folks at the Burton Group have toyed with this name for this kind of state as identity stateless. If you can get to be identity stateless to the extent possible, you have a lot more flexibility when it comes to this new environment. And of course, SAML and XACML and identity-based services are very popular for helping solve these problems. So I'd like to make a prediction. Take a deep breath here. Okay, should I say this? Yeah, I'm going to say it. We are going to continue to see further consumerization of IT. But what we're not going to see is ITization of consumers. They just won't buy it. We can't persuade them to do it. We can force our employees to use things we hand them and give them only one choice of payroll application, but it's just not an option on the open internet. So the smart way to bet, of course, is anything that is more lightweight, that is actually more restful. I know that word is anathema to a lot of folks in the enterprise, but there's value in it. It's smarter. It's the smarter way to bet to go with anything that's more open to experimentation and inviting developers into the community. And the smart way to bet is on anything that's more susceptible to network effects. So I got this moniker a long time ago as the Queen of Venn because I did this presentations and stuff around the Venn of identity. Well, I'm going to perpetrate another Venn diagram on you, the Venn of human to application relationships. So we have digital identity management of both the enterprise and the consumer sort on the left, and we've got this newer phenomenon of online social networking here on the right. And something that they share in common is differentiated application behavior based on permission data sharing. Everybody's gonna be talking about this in the future, although they're gonna have to change it to DABBOPDS. So, in identity management, we spend our time worrying about identification, often through authentication, authorization, especially in an enterprise setting, and personalization, especially in a kind of open internet setting, consumer identity. And in social networking, it's interesting to think about why there are human-to-application relationships, why we log in to something like a Facebook. It's so that we can have better human-to-human contact. We do that for collaboration reasons, and we do it for reasons of connectedness, human connectedness. And yet we still need that human-to-application kind. And what they both share is this need for data sharing about the person that was approved by them. Now, what happens when you have data sharing that was unapproved by the people involved? Well, you get that digital shadow stuff at the bottom. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the word cruft, kind of an Americanism among hackers to talk about just junk, garbage, bad things happen, unapproved use of data for unwanted direct marketing, for example. Something I think that's much more prevalent in the US versus here because people are so profligate about handing out their data. Now, there's another thing that belongs in this picture, which is vendor relationship management. And I have to say, I did not coin the term vendor relationship management. I'll talk about it more in a moment. But in a nutshell, VRM is individual control of the personal information